Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Real History. I am your host, History Professor Jared Frederick, and in this special installment, we are once again joined by a special guest. Before we get into that, as always, we invite you to subscribe to our page, like this video, leave a comment below. We are always welcome to hearing your suggestions about what we should cover next. But let's not waste any further time. Let's introduce our guest for today. And our guest is Jack Leonard. Jack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
All right, so you have a very special association with a series that we've dedicated a lot of time and conversation to here on Real History. What film were you recently involved in, and what role did you perform therein?
Okay, so first of all, just would like to say, if it's okay, I don't have a big idea about myself. I'm just a normal guy who got very lucky and was able to join Masters of the Air. I started out as a driver, so I got hired onto the driving team, productions driving team, I should say, driving the Willys Jeep, and spent a long time on the production. I started at the beginning and went right to the end, and during that time I was lucky enough to do quite a few different roles on the show. Was dressed in as an extra, and I would say pretty much everything until the end was on the crowd side of things. And then I got really lucky in that I was given a little role by a lady who I'm very grateful to, of Assistant Group Navigation Officer. And then later on, I moved on to doubling in the studio for the final month of production.
That sounds very exciting. How did you first find out about Masters of the Air, which I believe was presented under the alternative title of Whirlwind as it was being announced to those in the acting community? How did you first become aware of this production that was underway?
Much like everyone else on the crowd side of things, it was a flyer. So there was a flyer that was circulated, and a friend of mine, or more a friend of my dad's to be honest, but a friend by proxy to me, posted it on Facebook, and I looked at the flyer and thought I'd have a bit of that because it just looked really interesting, and it was looking for extras to work on a huge World War II production. It's very vague, so it didn't say anything about what the production was, or give any clues or anything. But I was furloughed at the time from my usual day job, and had nothing else to do, and the wife gave me permission, so I followed the instructions and filled out an application.
So when you finally arrive on set, what were your initial impressions?
Well, to be honest, the first experience of it was actually a driving assessment. So as I said, I applied as an extra, but actually I didn't get called in for that. I was penciled in for a few days, but unfortunately those days came and went, and I posted up on a group saying, look, this is what's happened. And the messages I got back were just, released, didn't get it, move on, etc. And not knowing what I was missing out on, I was marginally disappointed, but I wasn't completely devastated. Then about a week later, I got an email from the casting agency again, and they said that owing to something that I put in my application, they'd like to invite me down to do a driving assessment, which would be 3 days, and it would be with a view to joining the production on the driving side of things. So, driving on camera, but, again, very much under that crowd umbrella, if you know what I mean. So I got down there, and it was a beautiful day. It was in Abingdon Airfield, which turned out to be one of the locations. And even when I was down there, I didn't really know, because at this stage I didn't know anyone on the show, to get the gossip from. But we were all parked up waiting to go in, and we just saw driving along were these trucks with parts of what turned out to be one of the B-17s rather, on the back. So I guess they assembled them at the airfield, but they brought them in stages, and it was the first thing really we got to see of the show, was these massive sections of B-17 being driven in. We drove in, and there were all these World War II vehicles lined up, along with a massive setup from the production side of things. All the catering and buses and things to, hang out in and stuff. And there were Willys Jeeps, there were old Harley Davidsons, World War II Harley Davidsons with the big leather gun holsters and everything. And there were the big personnel carriers that you see a lot of, everyone jumping on and off of those in the show. And that was the first impressions. That was the first thing I saw.
What were some of the things that most impressed you about the set? We've had a number of people on this channel who just underscore the immense size of all of it, and that it was essentially like a big ant farm, that there were always things in motion. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, an ant farm would be a good description, because there were so many people around. So I would say on a daily basis there were somewhere in the region of 200, 250 extras. Then you had all the crew, obviously all the main cast. You had drivers, you had makeup people, hair people. It was a real hive of activity, and you would turn up to set at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock sometimes in the morning, and it'd be like the roads would be completely empty on the way there, and when you turned up, it was like this city almost at the main bases, which were Abingdon and Chalfont St Giles. And it was amazing, and I'd never seen anything like that before. So, for me, it was especially impressive.
As you transitioned from being a driver to having a more visible role in the film itself, I imagine there was quite the transition that you had to make, and perhaps some of the training or initiation that you had to go through. Did you have any interactions with the famous Dale Dye and the like as you were making that transfer?
Yeah, so what I'd say about that initially, actually, there wasn't any transfer from the driving side of things, because in the end we didn't get a drive. It was very strange, because we turned up on the first day of production, and we got shown to our pods, which are like little dressing rooms, and you had individual ones. And for the first week, there were no driving scenes, but they brought us in anyway, for one reason or another. And we'd see all the extras getting dressed into all the shots, and be very jealous of all those. And to be honest with you, that was our aspiration, as was just to get in anything at that stage. Suddenly, the second week of production came around, and we turned up as we did at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And instead of all the stunt guys in the pods opposite, the labels had changed on the front to the name above and then action vehicles. So and there was 10 or 15 of these, and we were all wondering what this was all about. And it turned out that the people that provided the vehicles didn't want us driving the vehicles, so they brought in their own people, and we then slipped to reserve on the show for the driving. And we didn't see the sense of it, because they never took a day off, and they were always in, and we were just there trying to join lineups to get into scenes. But a costume person would come along and pull us out of the lineup and say, no, you can't be in this, you're a driver, despite the fact we never got a drive. So I was down on set one day, and one guy actually chucked it in because it was just a case of turning up and sitting on the bus and doing nothing, and he'd had enough of it. But and to be honest with you, a few of the other guys were edging that way. And an assistant director, crowd AD, came up to me on the bus and said, "Why don't you just come down to set, and a few of your lads are down there." And they were calling for a lineup of officers, and they actually called it brown jacket. So it was a lineup of people in the A2s. Is it A2s or A1s? Sorry, Joe, I just slipped my mind. The brown thin leather jackets.
A2s, I believe. Yes. Yeah.
A2s, B3s, so A2s, and there were no costume people around. So I thought, well, now's my chance. So I jumped on the end of the lineup, and it was next to the control tower, and lo and behold, down from the control tower came Dale Dye. And he went up and down, and I couldn't believe my eyes, because I was so close to such a legend. He's been in pretty much everything from Platoon. He's either been in everything or military advised on everything, or both, from Platoon all the way up to the present day. And it's amazing to see him, let alone for him to turn around and say, "I'll take you, and you," and he pointed to me. So suddenly we got ushered up the tower, and this whole time I'm thinking someone's going to grab my shoulder, a costume lady's going to be on set somewhere and drag me out like they've done so many times. Became a bit of a running joke, but it never happened. And I got up to the top of the steps there, and I got to be in it. I got my first shot, which was episode 1, watching aircraft taking off. And I was absolutely buzzing. Like I just couldn't believe it. Callum Turner was there, and Stephen Moore was there in the shot as well, and I was pinching myself. So we went down, and they said, "Look, we're going to wrap for the day. Send home for the day, half of you all. So anyone who wants to go home, just put your hands up, and we'll travel you back to the main tent." So I kept my hands down, because suddenly I've gone from, almost wanting to leave to, just being at the top of the world, basically. And I stayed. Anyway, later that afternoon, an AD turned around and said, "Look, everyone turn and face Dale Dye at the top of the control tower." And on the same day, he pointed me out and got me up again for episode 3. And that was my first 2 run-ins with Dale Dye, of like a few conversations I had with him, and actually later on being given my direction from him in my little scene.
So did he maintain that military discipline mindset that he is well known for, or was he more nurturing when it came to how the scenes were orchestrated themselves and the people who were in them?
I would say he was quite military about it all. Quite he was very specific. He didn't there was no fluff around anything he said. It was all very to the point. And his, am I able to use a swear word, Jared?
Sure.
Okay, so he would famously say when he finished telling everyone what to do, he would famously say, "Don't fuck it up," and that would be his last words, and then he'd leave. But yeah, he was very military about it, but he also had a really good sense of humour, and it was just like a nice balance between the 2 character traits, I would say.
Tough love.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that probably sums it up, to be honest.
What were some of the other interactions that you had with the primary cast?
Well, funnily enough, because as you know, a lot of these cast members, they had done things in their own right prior to the show, but you would only really know them if you had specifically seen them in something, or were very aware about it. So my whole time on the show was characterized by me talking to people and not actually realizing exactly who they were for the first time I spoke to them. And one of which, unbelievably now, because Elvis has come out and everything else that's come out was Austin Butler. So the first time I ever spoke with Austin was I was being dressed into we got led into a Nissan hut for a briefing, and there was just this guy sat there on the side of the Nissan hut, and I was told to go down this particular row, as the seats were all lined up. I was sent down this particular row, and there was this guy sitting the row ahead of me, and I just started talking to him, and he had a very deep, like how Austin Butler speaks. I won't try, but it was Austin, but I didn't know who he was, so I just spoke to him very much on a level, and how long you've been on the production? He said, from the beginning, and. He said, what do you do normally? And I said, well, normally, ironically, I work in aviation. So, to be on this is a bit of a dream and everything. And then I said, look, I haven't asked your name. Sorry, what's your name? And he said, it's Austin. And then immediately the penny dropped, and it was Austin Butler. And luckily, I knew one thing from his filmography, which was the Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, what was it like working on that? And he said, it was a dream. It's, amazing. And he was just very nice. And he wasn't insulted at all, which is something that I think was, perhaps someone with a greater complex about themselves might have had an issue with you not recognizing them, especially as key cast, And this is very early on, by the way. But he was just very nice, and I don't know if this is true, but one of the extras from behind told me afterwards. But Callum Turner walked over, and basically the conversation finished because Callum Turner walked over and started talking to him. So Austin stood up for Callum Turner, and I thought, okay, well, that's the end of that. And I just started looking around because the sets were incredible. There was stuff all over the walls, and genuine original posters of how to identify silhouettes of enemy aircraft, and they would have the silhouette in black, for the airmen to be able to spot them, I guess, against the backdrop of the sky or whatever. So I was just reading things off the walls and stuff like that. Anyway, they both walked off, and an extra tapped me on the back and said, "You've just left Austin Butler hanging." And apparently he turned around and went to shake my hand, but I was so busy looking elsewhere that I missed the shake, and I left him hanging apparently. But I did speak to him later on, when ironically I ended up doubling him, and he didn't mention it.
Well, that's a good segue to one of the next questions I was going to ask you, and that is, how does one become the stand-in or the double for Austin Butler?
Okay. Well, basically, it was. I thought I'd been wrapped for the whole production at the end, and we missed a little bit. We'll go back and talk about maybe the stuff in the middle with the assistant group navigation officer things, but the same lady that gave me that chance to portray that character sent me a message at the end of production and said, "Are you around all of November?" And I was furloughed and had nothing better to do, so I replied, "Yes, 100%. I'm doing nothing." And she said, "Great, because we need you in the studio for doubling." And I couldn't believe my ears, because all the people that doubled on the show, the I guess the extras, or I say extras because a more well-known term, it's SAs, supporting artists, that got the chance to double, had a great experience with it. So I felt really lucky to be offered it. And I went down to Aylesbury, which was incredibly impressive. So they effectively built their own studio. for the show with the volume unit there, which was this big rear screen projection, quite famously rear screen projection setup, where they had a B-17 in the middle of it, and they could, project the enemy attackers onto it and stuff. And that in itself was huge. That was in the sort of main central bit. And then there were, I think, like 2 or 3 massive sound stages, which the scale of which you wouldn't believe, And they all had a massive wraparound rear screen projection at the far end. Excuse me. And every time I saw them, they could change on a daily basis, from a desert scene to a hard stand in Thorpe Abbots, on a daily basis. It was incredible. But I was down there to do what were called mission inserts. So I've got a few sides from the show, which is like an extract from the film, from the script, of what's being shot that day, and my name's in there, but as a generic airman. And the idea was that the cast members would be there filming their scene in the cockpit, and they'd have a camera facing them. And if they had a switch to flick, they would just reach down and flick the switch, but they wouldn't film the flicking of the switch because it took so long. So we would then get in their costume and their gloves and their jacket and whatever was in the sort of arm area, and we would then do the mission insert. So we would do that flicking of the switch, and that one flicking of a switch could be a whole day's work. It was incredible how long it took to set up a camera extreme close up on the switch, and then we'd come back and the filming of it, and I didn't know until then how many different ways there were to flick a switch, frankly. We'd do it, 2 fingers, above, below, 1 finger, fast, slow, in, slow, fast flick, out, slow, whatever. So that's what we were there to primarily do. Then it turned out that I was the same measurements as Austin Butler. So there was a funny story that the dog Meatball, who was this beautiful husky, for anyone who's not seen the show, Meatball just apparently did not get on with Austin whatsoever. He wouldn't act with Austin. He wouldn't follow, or do what he was meant to do. He would run past him instead of back to him when he was playing fetch with him on this sort of fogged out hard stand scene. And they needed to reshoot the whole thing with a double. So they start measuring me up, and it turns out, in fact, I will fit his outfit, and I got to put on his actual costume. And we didn't even change, because he's obviously got blonde hair in the show. They didn't even change my hair color. There was no hair or makeup, because it was with a crusher and his B3 with the pop collar.
Yeah.
All the shots were from behind, so there was no need for any of that. And got brought down to the set, which was on one of these huge sound stages, and it was completely filled with what they called Atmos, which was effectively fog. It's like dry ice kind of fog. But we're talking something the size of a football stadium, a football pitch. American football, or even soccer maybe. And it was just completely full of this Atmos, and they had a full-size B-17 replica on an actual concrete hard stand with real grass all around it. And if you walked 10 yards into the set, because of all the Atmos, you were outside on a hard stand. Basically, it was incredible.
That is.
So I got to spend the morning bonding with the dog. So with the dog's handler, we did a lot of feeding the dog and playing fetch with the dog, and it was all like working up to the scene. So we would then, at that stage I couldn't touch the dog, and I could then stroke the dog, and in the end we started filming, and we reshot that whole fogged out scene, every single shot from the very beginning to the very end, and luckily one shot of the doubling made it in, and I guess they managed to save the rest of it, but it was this shot from behind where Meatball runs past me, and that's probably my favourite shot of the whole show, because it's the one time that, with the exception of Meatball, I'm the only person in the frame on Masters of the Air. So really proud of that one. And I spoke with Austin at the Green Room the following day. I was with a friend of mine called Alex Whitbread, who was doing doubling as well. And I said, I was playing with Meatball yesterday, reshooting those fogged out scenes. And he just said, "Oh, that damn dog."
Well, I understand Meatball was offended because Austin just started instinctively singing "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog." I made that up. Yeah, that's not a true story.
It wouldn't have surprised me, because he did seem a little bit still in the Elvis swing of things. But I mean, I
couldn't resist it. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Well, we talked. We actually talked a lot about the Elvis film, and he spent a lot of time away from home, and ironically, one thing he was very keen to do, because he was in Australia and then he came to the UK for the filming of Master of the Air. Despite the fact Meatball didn't like him, he was very keen to get back to his own dog. And that was probably the thing he spoke most fondly of, was his dog.
That's a great story. So you're in several headquarters and office scenes as well, with the like of Anthony Boyle, Harry Crosby, a number of those staff characters and whatnot. What was it like to be working in that sort of environment? And going back to you referencing the switches in the cockpit and so on, how were you able to use your real life expertise in aviation in scenes and settings like that?
Well, funnily enough, actually, when I was given this role as Assistant Group Navigation Officer, the very first scene that we shot was around the map in the ops room. And this is when we got the direction from Dale Dye about what to say and everything. And I was quite surprised, because I thought that would come all from the director, but the director was very busy setting up the shot with the cameraman and everything else. So Dale Dye came over to us, and it was me, Anthony Boyle, and there were two other extras as well, two friends of mine, were standing there around the table, and he came up to us and said, "Okay, you got to say this, and you're going to reply this, and you'll say words to that effect, and then this guy is going to come in and give you, Anthony, a piece of paper, and you're going to look up at the board and say, no, put Davies in 567 or whatever." And then at the end, we were going to face each other and say, he was going to say, "I need those coordinates as quickly as possible." And I would reply, "You got it," or "No problem," or, some variation of that. And then, of course, at the end, he said, and "Don't fuck it up." But it was interesting, because when a part of that scene was to plot something. So Anthony would walk in, and he had some photos in his hands, and he was meant to slam them down on the map and say, "That's our new target, boys, and it's there." Excuse the accent. And then he says, "Plot that to me." So when we did our first take, he says, "Okay, that's our new target, and it's there. Plot that for me, will you?" I actually leant across him, because if he's asking me to plot something on that specific part of the map, I'm going to lean across and plot on that specific part of the map. But of course, that doesn't work in film, because I'm leaning straight across the main character and blocking the shot. So his arms went straight up in the air as if to say, "Oh, what's this amateur doing?" And I had to eat some humble pie for a second, and hope that they wouldn't go get this amateur out and get someone in who knows what they're doing. So in that sense, it sort of hindered me a little bit, because I was trying to be a bit too real. And for the remainder of the takes, we just scribbled, okay, I'll make a note for later, kind of thing. But in the end, that scene got reduced to about 20 seconds, and there was a voiceover for it. So in the end, it was all a lot of stress for nothing. Or not for nothing. I got it was amazing, and I got a really good shot from it. But it didn't make it in its full glory like I thought it might. But yeah, with the flicking of the switches, I thought that would be the easiest thing in the world. But apparently I flicked switches wrong, because we had to do them 200 times.
You're in aviation. What do you know about flicking switches, right?
Well, that's it, exactly.
What period detail impressed you most from working in those sorts of very authentically recreated indoor sets?
Do you know what, though? The whole show was about attention to detail. First of all, the costume. I think her surname is Atwood. Anyway, I think. But she's a very famous costume lady, and she's won many Oscars. And I would say I was absolutely blown away by the fact that the costumes were so on point. Most of the stuff was real. Some of it even went back to real World War II, actual stuff, which just blew my mind. I thought it would all be, mocked up or whatever. But whether it was mocked up or whether it was legit World War II stuff, that was incredible. And you had a lot of experts, on the costume side of things who were, just so knowledgeable about that period of time, and what they would be wearing and at what stage of the war, and they'd come and swap out insignias and things to make it legitimate for that state, whatever specific stage of the war it was. So the costumes would be the first thing, and then moving on from that, just an example of how amazing the props were. On the sets, there were on the desks of the officers, of the commanding officer, was a stack of envelopes, and it just looked like normal envelopes from afar. But if you actually pick them up, they were stamped, but not with ink. They like a depression. What's the word I'm looking for, Jared?
Engraved or embossed or something like that. Mm-hmm.
That's right, with the 8-ball, and a camera. It doesn't matter if it was 10K UHD. I don't think a camera would have ever been able to pick that up. Yet it was done, and there were documents in and out trays on desks, and you could go to any one of them and pick them up, and it would have it would be as if you're reading a real document. The ones after the top one would never be seen unless an actor ad-libbed and picked it up and got a glimpse, a millisecond on camera, but yet they still wrote all these letters and things. So this is the attention to detail that they went into. And anyone that doubts that the detail was, not top notch, really doesn't realize how much work went into making this authentic by a lot of people who know a lot about the subject matter.
The historian in me hopes that a lot of those props found a good home at a museum or a historic site where they could be used and repurposed for educational purposes. But who knows where a lot of that may have ended up.
I know some of the Nissan huts ended up being repurposed and sent to good homes, but small props like pieces of paper and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. So I've interviewed many actors from many different historical movies, and many of them often remember the extremes, the funniest moment, the most dangerous moment, the most meaningful moment, the most tense moment, and so on and so forth. Do you have any of those high point emotions that come to mind as you reflect on your on-set experiences?
Yeah, I mean, there were moments you were very cold because we were shooting in the UK. There were moments you were, very hot and almost too hot in all the class ones or, full flight gear, standing there in the middle of summer, 32 degrees, 35 degrees, whatever, Celsius. So you always remember those. But funny moments, maybe. There was one anecdote I could probably share with you, but I won't disclose if it's okay with you the actor because
Sure.
I don't think it represents him for who he actually is. He seems a really nice guy, but we were filming in a Nissan hut, another briefing scene. So a lot happened in these briefing scenes, and I think it was Liam, who's a good friend of mine, by the way, Adjutant Liam. Shouted his line, a 10 hut.
A 10 hut!
And everyone was told to jump up, spring up, and, arms by their sides, while all the main officers, make their way in. Anyway, this particular actor makes their way in, and as we're sitting down from the front row, he turns round and he says, "Hey," and he points to the guy next to me. He says, "Hey, get your fucking hat off," to this guy. So everyone's a bit like, is he being serious or is this all just part of the scene? Anyway, the guy sheepishly sort of takes his hat off, and the rest of the scene, take one, gets done. Anyway, as he's, we're all told to reset, and as he's walking out, the SA, supporting artist, says to him, "God, you really had me there. I thought you were being for real." And he stayed in his American voice, so maybe he was, doing the officer, just trying to stay in character, I guess. But he turned around and said, "Well, you should take your hat off." And the look of shock on the guy's face was just as if to say, "Really?" And he disbelief. Are you still joking? Is this still a joke, or are you being serious now? Anyway, at this moment, he looks around and he starts noticing that other people have their hats on in the briefing room. So he starts going, "Now you take your hat off, and you take your hat off, and why have you got your hat on?" And he starts literally going for all of these extras, saying, "Take your hat off." And a few of the extras start pushing back and saying no, because prior to the scene being shot, the outside, all the costume people went around and said, "Right, you keep your hat on, you keep your hat on, you take yours off, you keep your hat on, you take yours off." And they gave everyone an instruction to either take the hat off or leave it on. So some, start pushing back, and he gets increasingly aggravated, and then he leaves. And then I think it was the first or second assistant director on Unit 1, like the main first AD, turned around and said, "Look, just everyone take your hats off. Just everyone take your hats off for this scene." So all the hats came off. Anyway, we shot the rest of the scene, and it was a wrap for the day, and we all went back. And when we were all in our pods in this giant sort of tarpaulin tent, all you can hear from all the pods is, "Get your hat off, take your hat off." It's all the extras shouting this joke to everyone. And we all went home for the day. Anyway, the next day we came back in, and we all got dressed as we did. So we would do our COVID test, we would self-isolate in our pods, and then we would get the all clear, and we would go and get hair. We'd get our breakfast, then costume, and then hair and makeup. And then we'd go for a lineup to make sure that we were all World War II legit and looking as we should do. And it would be the costume people. So as we lined up, much in the same way that you get those speeches, in like Braveheart or Gladiator, there was the head costume lady was walking up and down this massive line of like 200 guys, giving this huge speech about, we are the costume department, we know exactly what we're doing, we know when you should have your hat on, we know when you should have your hat off. And don't let any actor tell you. And if an actor tells you to change your costume, then you tell us, and blah, blah, blah. And she gave this massive stirring speech. And all these 200, SAs are all shouting and going, yeah, yeah, and all, getting really animated about it. And do you know the song, You Can Keep Your Hat On by Hot Chocolate?
Yes.
So in the everyone's really riled up, and as we're filing out to travel to set, one of the ADs puts on the loudspeakers, "You Can Leave Your Hat On" by Hot Chocolate, and it was just the funniest thing, and it was probably the longest running joke of the whole production, because in between takes it was like naughty schoolboys. People would just shout. You just hear from the back of the room, "Get your hat off," or something like that. So that was a great story.
You can leave your hat on.
That is splendid.
Yeah, it was great. It was there was a lot of banter on set. It was like a big boys club, basically.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel that camaraderie helped to create a sense of authenticity on set?
Yeah, definitely, because unless you were in the cast bracket, which in the cast bracket I would put the cast themselves, their doubles, and their stand-ins. So unless you were in cast, you were one of the outsiders, and you got fed amazingly well. Like, the food on set was incredible. You get huge breakfasts, huge lunches, huge dinners. You've never eaten so much in your life. But it was all it wasn't, no one was in trailers, put it that way. And I think adversity kind of creates a bit of a bond amongst people who are going through the same thing, if you get what I'm saying. So not that we were, it was adversity, but it was because we were all experiencing the same thing, and we were in the same boat, we all kind of lumped together, and it was, we felt like the airman that we were portraying, I think, in many ways, because we'd see each other every day, and make friendships, and people would come and people would go, and it was very much like that, obviously, but without the actual adversary of going and flying missions, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, along those lines, were there any emotional or profound moments where the weight or the meaningful nature of the story very much became apparent to you and everybody else?
Yeah, so I didn't actually do any of the POW stuff. So I was very much on the base and in those kinds of settings. So I didn't get to see any of that, but certainly the end of the war stuff, because they actually filmed the end of the war stuff at the same time. At the end of production. So it was very easy to portray this feeling of reflection and what have you, for the end of the war, when the end of the actual. Sorry, Jared, the dog's going off. Can you hear the dog?
It's Meatball, right?
It's Meatball, yeah.
All right.
Just a little bit less well behaved, actually. So it was really easy to portray that time in the war, because for us, we'd been on it for 9 months, at that stage, and it was all wrapping up. I remember the scene in the bar at the end where it was literally the last time we shot in the officers' lounge or the officers' mess, and the direction was, this is the last time we're using this set. Go absolute, throw stuff, jump on things, dance on the tables, whatever. And you couldn't help but feel like because the production was coming to an end, you couldn't help but feel not quite the same level of emotion that you would have felt with the war coming to an end, but you couldn't help but feel something there, Yeah, and it was very easy to portray that sort of joy, and also the reflective nature of it, I guess.
That's a wonderful anecdote. What other scenes, and we can incorporate some screenshots and footage and video and so on, where else can we find you in the series?
I was lucky enough to make it into every episode. So in the very early stages, it's sort of blink and you'll miss me stuff, but it makes for some great stills, and I've got them all printed off and everything. A bit geeky, I guess. But in the later stages, after I was given this small role as assistant group navigation officer, the shots got better and longer for me, and in the sort of episode 6 onwards, when I get a bit more clearer, fully in focus screen time. I did manage in 3 scenes to ad-lib words with the say-so of the powers that be, but unfortunately the voice didn't make it into the final take. But it doesn't matter to me, because it was just an amazing experience, and even more so than that, actually, was the fact that I was given this assistant group navigation officer job. I did a lot of research, and I could only ever find one person who was linked to that job at the time that it was depicted in the show, or I was seen in the show. And it was a guy called Stuart James Gillison, who was a first lieutenant, and he finished the war as a captain. And I did more and more digging, and it turns out he was quite a hero, actually. And I spoke with his daughter, Sue Gillison Dickey, and found out loads about him. And he was actually on that aircraft that went down on the 3rd of February with Rosie Rosenthal over Berlin. It wasn't depicted in the show, unfortunately, but the reality of it was that this chap, the bailout bell was sounded, and he didn't want to bail out because he was looking after the injured bombardier. And he refused to bail out until the bombardier passed away, apparently. So he did, in the end, leave the aircraft and make his way to the ground. And he went on the run for 3 months, actually, before he managed to find his way into Russian hands.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, via Russia, he ended up in Italy. And he made his way back to Thorpe Abbotts from Italy. And he actually stayed there until September of 1945. But it was after his death that Rosie Rosenthal himself recommended him posthumously for a Silver Star for that moment, and he got awarded it. So it's incredible stories that came from that aren't even shown.
Yeah, well, and going full circle, another one of the officers who was on that aircraft was Lieutenant Arthur Jacobson, who in an earlier episode is portrayed by actor Sam Rosenthal, who is the real-life grandson of Rosie Rosenthal, who has also come on our channel to talk about not only his film experience, but also his family connection. And we've also had your friend Liam on our show as well. So I feel that we have a fusion of wonderful stories coming together here that are interconnected in one form or another.
Definitely. Well, Liam, I think, has been in more films than most Hollywood actors. He's pretty much been in everything. Sometimes I go to the cinema and I just see Liam in a film out of nowhere. And with regards to Sam, I actually connected with Sam not too long ago because I was lucky enough to come across a signature of Rosie Rosenthal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, cutout signature on eBay.
Wow.
I bought it. And when Sam posted on a group, Master of the Air Behind the Scenes group, and I commented on there and said, I believe, I played a group assistant navigation officer or assistant group navigation officer, and I believe the chap was called Stuart James Gillison, or Stu Gillison. And he actually got shot down with your dad, and so on and so forth. And that's actually where Sue Gillison-Dickey commented, and that's how we got talking. So
social media can be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we start to conclude, are there any additional stories that you would like to share that we haven't already covered?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps one. We were filming in the centre of Oxford, and this really gives you an idea as to the difference between cast and crowd, basically. But I would say the biggest thing, or the one thing that really stood out that cast and crew got that crowd didn't, was and I think Liam mentioned it to you, was craft. So this was all the good stuff, all the sweets and the nice coffees, and what you would get from your Starbucks, as opposed to straight out of a instant packet. So the craft tent, and this day that we were shooting, it must have been 34, 35 degrees. It was so hot, in the middle of town, in the middle of Oxford, and the craft tent was right in the middle of crowd holding, or the holding area for everyone. And everyone was going up, who were entitled to crowd. They were going up and getting their ice cold cans of Coke and all their sweets and all the goodies and everything. And all the crowd people were not getting anything, frankly, until dinner time or lunchtime or whatever, when you'd get a huge lunch, but in between you're not entitled to any of the stuff. And there was a little bit of friction starting to occur between crowd and craft. And the boiling point was that one SA tried to fill up their water from the craft water dispenser, which was chilled. And all the other water dispensers were not chilled. So all the ones that crowd could use were not chilled, and all the ones that and the ones at craft were actually chilled. And on this 35-degree day, with tensions boiling over already, there was going to be a huge mutiny. I would say it was probably one more thing away from massively spilling over. And luckily enough, some of the crowd ADs came in and went round, I think, to like the local Tesco's, or our equivalent of Walmart, basically, and just brought back crate after crate of Cokes and Sprites and everything, just to diffuse the situation. But I've never seen it so close to a revolt. Yeah, it's like the sort of peasants' revolt, basically, like versus the aristocracy, you know. But yeah, it was close. It was a close call.
That is a great story. Having been a double for Austin Butler, have you ever like played that card at a party or a social event? Like, well, do you know who I was a double for? Have you ever done?
I'll probably live on that for the rest of my life. And one thing I actually did say to him was I met him one more time after doing that scene with him, or playing him in that scene. I said to him, "You've got to promise me that you get really big and famous, because I intend to use this story for the rest of my life." And little did I know, he'd win the BAFTA British Film Award for Best Actor for Elvis, and Oscar nominated already. That was already cemented. But
I think many of the main characters have bright futures ahead of them.
Yeah, well, it's the same with Band of Brothers. If you look at who were in Band of Brothers, the list is endless about who was in there, and they were unknown at the time, and they went on to be the next generation of stars. And I think that's already happened, with the likes of Anthony Boyle and Austin Butler and Callum Turner and Barry Keogh. They're all massively lifted off already, so they're probably ahead of schedule.
Absolutely. Well, Jack, thank you so much for joining us on this special episode of Real History. I hope when I cross the pond next time that I might be able to join you and Liam for a pint, and we can regale in more stories about the making of the film.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in to Real History. Once again, we invite you to hit that subscribe button below, like this video, leave a comment. Every little bit helps. Until we see you next time on Real History, stay curious.